pitching against them directly. But as a pitcher, when you're a starter, you only play one game. So you have all the time that you just mentioned to be in the dugout for two of the other ones and the portion of the one that you played in that you just didn't, later on in the game. So you get a chance to hear a lot of great things. I do remember one particular line when we were in Alabama, and Kenny Camp, tall, thin guy, hitting in the batter's box, and somebody looked at him and yelled very loudly, "Hey, Kenny, who's been stealing your meal money?" And we all in the dugout thought that was pretty funny. So I think that line right there might have been what made Alabama stick out for me.
That's fabulous. Okay, what is your travel food? What kind of travel food did you? It
was interesting because at Young Harris, where I started out, junior college up in North Georgia, the joke, but also the go-to place for us was Golden Corral.
Oh.
So, maybe some bourbon chicken, some soft serve afterwards were two popular ones at Golden Corral. But that was, if we were there, if we were out, for a road series, if we were out, 3 nights, two of those three days we were eating Golden Corral, at least one meal a day, sometimes twice. And I'd say Georgia State was a little bit different though. Georgia State, a lot of times we would, stop like in an exit off the highway, and they would just hand us our, daily allotment of, meal money and just say, "Hey, go get you something and bring it back, and we'll eat." So, you had a little bit more selection at Georgia State when you were just walking off the bus and they gave you some money to get some food. So sometimes that was a sit-down place that you ordered takeout from. Sometimes it was just getting a couple of cheeseburgers from McDonald's. But it was one of the benefits, especially at Georgia State, you never really knew where you were going to eat that day until you stopped at whatever exit you were
on. Yeah, because the campuses are about 1 mile, 2 miles apart, but the baseball field was maybe 10 miles apart, or maybe 12.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, so it wasn't a long drive. So yeah, that's pretty funny. Okay, so what do you miss about playing?
I think having a schedule. Obviously you have a schedule now, but in season there was a rhythm to everything. You knew, what you were going to be doing on a particular day. You had that weekend to look forward to because you knew you were going to be playing. And I think maybe that's the biggest part, was you always had in season, something baseball competitive related to look forward to. It wasn't, an adult life where Saturday you're like, yeah, I got to cut the grass. It's like, hey, I get to play baseball on Saturday, or I get to, travel to this place to then go play baseball on this particular day. So I think just having the rhythm and the flow of what, how things were in season and that cadence that we had, as well as just looking forward to every single weekend because you were going up against a new opponent and you had the opportunity to do what you enjoy doing, every 5th or 6th day for me.
Do you miss the competition?
Oh, absolutely. It's with playing a sport, lots of times, everybody has a very similar mindset. Everybody's in the dugout wanting to beat the other team, and likewise them to you. And it's accepted, like you understand that. And they understand that. And, and you get into the working world, the professional world, and not everybody's wired that way. And, you can't just be outwardly competitive in certain situations because that makes you look a certain way, as opposed to, on a baseball field, you can be outwardly competitive because everybody expects it and everybody's kind of wired similarly in terms of, wanting to win.
So is there a way you have solved this kind of rhythm to your competitive nature? I mean, what have you done to kind of fill that void?
Golf is a big thing, at least from a competition standpoint. I have an 8-year-old son, 5-year-old sons who both play T-ball and baseball respectively. So you get a little bit of a chance to at least be on the coaching side. So sometimes you feel like you're playing a video game, trying to put the players in the right spots and setting them the most that you can to be successful. But again, at 8 and 5, there's only so many times they're going to do things the right way at this age. So, if you notice, I have a little bit less hair than I did when I was playing. And
you look great. You look great.
Part of that's just trying to coach little kids and temper my expectations from what I used to expect from myself. But away from that, I mean, golf has been a big thing because that's one of those sports where you can always improve. And as a baseball player, a former baseball player, 37 years old, if I pick up a baseball today, there's no way in the world I could do it at the level I could do it 15 years ago. Whereas, I tell people all the time with golf, even if I don't hit it as far, if I don't swing as fast, 5 years from now as I do now, every time you go out, it could be the best round you've ever had, or you have the opportunity to compete at as high a level that you're capable of. And so that skill sticks around for a little bit longer, and the ability to perform sticks around for a little bit longer. But at the same time, it kind of helps fill that competitive void where you want to go out, you want to win, you want to play well, and you don't have to be playing against somebody else, you're playing against yourself. So it makes it easier to handle with golf in the picture than if I didn't have anything at all.
Right. Okay. So tell me, we talked about after eligibility, like the day that eligibility came. What did that feel like, or can you walk us through what you realized, how you solved it, that sort of thing?
Yeah. So baseball season is in around the time graduation is, around the time that the academic calendar ends. And so, I tell people fairly frequently that, you go from being a student and an athlete for 18 years, from basically 4 or 5 years old to 22, 23, depending on if you're redshirted. And then you literally wake up the next day and you're not either one of those things.
Yes. I think baseball is the worst, and softball, because you all end about the same time and graduate, and it's like that is a hard stop.
Yeah. So everything you've known, everything you've done up until that point is no longer there. And so it kind of makes you question or makes you wonder, all right, what now? And there are some people that probably don't have this problem because they maybe had an idea of what they wanted to do professionally, more so than I did, or even still do. And so they are able to kind of play, but also prepare during that 4 year time or 5 or 6 year time that you're in school. I didn't really have that experience as much. I went to junior college and took a fairly generic course load. And then from an eligibility perspective, there's only a small list of majors that you're able to choose in order to stay eligible based on NCAA rules. So I had to make a decision based on a limited list of majors. Ultimately chose psychology because I thought it would be fairly universally applicable to, lots of things. But nonetheless, you spend all your time in school, going to school and thinking about the sport that you're playing, not so much what you're going to do after it's all over. But at the same time, the finality of it comes pretty quickly for a lot of folks. And, one day you're not a student, and one day you're not an athlete. That's also the same. They're both the same day. Yeah. Then you got to just kind of figure it out from there. I think one of the biggest kind of moments for me was as we were driving I was riding in the car with my parents from Georgia State Field with all my stuff and, kind of my stuff to check out of, or when I moved out of the loft down at Georgia State. And my dad looked in the back as we're on the downtown connector around Grady Curve going about 4 miles an hour, like you always are.
Yeah,
and true. So he had the opportunity to turn around and look at me as opposed to, looking through the rearview mirror because we weren't moving. But his question was, all right, so what are you gonna do for health insurance? I never even thought about that question. So, it comes fast and you got to start making some decisions, whether you're being super, I guess, seeking things out, or if things come to you and having to decide what it is that you'd like to do. You have to make some of those decisions very quickly, and it creeps up on you, and it happens fast.
So how did you, what were the things that, so what was your first job?
My first job was at Career Builder, selling job advertising to a whole bunch of businesses. So, calling, I remember my first few weeks on the job, really no professional experience whatsoever. Your job was just to hammer the phones and call as many people as you could and, sell as much as you could as quickly as you could. And, you're literally reading questions off a sheet that they provide you, and you don't really know what you're talking about, but you're just
Right.
trying to figure it out as you go. And one of the great things about it though was that you had the opportunity to talk to a lot of different types of people, a lot of different types of organizations. So you got a decent feel of kind of how things generally, or how certain types of companies operate. But yeah, my first job out of school was dialing for dollars for career builders.
When you no, have you stated, and since I know you are a little competitive, did that help you with sales?
It did. You're looking around and, especially it's funny because like in baseball, because I was a right-handed pitcher, threw barely, I mean, I threw 88, 89 miles an hour on a good day. So it was pretty clear. I had plenty of time to recognize that professional baseball was probably not going to be my thing.
Uh-huh.
But at the same time, like when you're on a baseball field, you can look at other people and be like, yeah, he just threw that ball 97 miles an hour. I can't do that. There's nothing I could do to get myself to be able to throw a ball 97 miles an hour. Whereas in the working world, you're looking over there and, like somebody who's 15 years older than you are, bald and, like not in great shape. It's like, wow, they're still better. Like there's nothing that sticks out that tells you like, why is that person so successful? Why is that person, doing better? But at the same time, like, wanting to make sure that you stuck out, you're looking around, trying to figure out the activities that people are doing, the tasks that they're doing, the way that they go about their day, the way that they organize their meetings and things like that, to figure out anything you can to be successful. And so I think having that experience in competition, you're always evaluating your opponent, try to figure out, I guess in some cases maybe their weaknesses or how as a pitcher you can get them out. But
Right.
similarly, you're looking at your competition in the office to figure out what it is that they're doing to try to emulate what they're doing to be successful. The upside there is that nobody's throwing 97, so everything that they're doing is you could probably learn how to do as opposed to just being out of luck.
How did you solve the experience that you've had forever about being a team on a team? How did that transition work for you? Or was there someone you talked to that really helped you? Did they say something to you, or did you just have to live it out?
I think for me, you just had to just kind of figure it out. I mean, I do think though that as a pitcher, right, you need your team behind you.
Right.
But it all starts with you. So
yeah. Okay.
If you're giving up missiles to the left center field gap, right center field gap, which I give up plenty of those. But at the same time, like there's only so much your team can help you if you're doing those things. So I think having the mindset that as an individual contributor in a sales organization, but also as a pitcher, like you still have to take care of the things that you need to do to be successful and to put your maybe sales team or your company in a position to be successful. So I think those things kind of translate pretty well in the professional world, but also in the sports world. Yes, you want your team to win. Yes, you want to be successful, but you also recognize that you have to do your part in order for all of that to materialize.
Right. Yeah. So how I guess do you realize, or at what point do you realize that things you took from practice you use as being a dad or in that works maybe with your kids but maybe doesn't work in the business world? Because are you still in sales? You're still in sales?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Is there something that all of a sudden you stop yourself and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just did that, or this is what I've always done, or something like that?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that sticks out is like providing or receiving feedback, or in some cases criticism. Because there's a way you can deliver a message on a field that is perfectly acceptable, that if you did it that way in a professional world, you probably wouldn't have a job much longer.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a big part of the learning curve is having to understand, that there are different personalities, there's different, ways people want to receive information and having to adapt the way you would instinctively provide feedback and adapt that to a way that's maybe a little bit more appropriate for the setting that you're in. I think that goes for parenting too. I mean, there are times when you just want to be loud, but like it's not exactly the most effective thing in the world. Whereas on a sports field, I don't know if it's changed much or not since I played, but somebody yelling was no big deal. It's just the way it is. But
Yeah.
with your kid, you got to pick your moment. So I think receiving and providing feedback is probably the biggest areas where you had to evaluate your new environment versus the old one and adjust accordingly.
Yeah. Okay. All right. If you could go back to Georgia State and tell your sophomore year Jeramy something about where you are now, what would you tell him?
About where I am now. Yeah, I think, it's going to sound kind of cliche, but just taking things day to day. I could certainly be a lot more successful than I am now. I mean, that's a given. Like everybody could always be a little bit better than they are. Although when I was in school, I never quite envisioned establishing a career, whether on purpose or by accident. I would venture to say that the career that I've established has been more by accident than on purpose. But at the same time, I think understanding or being able to tell a younger version of me that you just take it day by day and try to do what you think is best each day, then kind of overall your body of work shows for itself.
Yeah, that's in baseball, you probably had a playbook or a film study or something like that that you used then. Is there a playbook you can use now?
Not one that's as defined as the one that you had back then. I think when you're playing a sport, there are right ways and wrong ways to do things. As hitters, right, in baseball, every hitter's their stance is gonna look different. But when it comes time, when they're ready to swing, they're all generally in the same position. And there's a lot of characteristics that they have in common that lead to success, hitting. And pitching is the same way. Like everybody arrives at the same place a little bit differently, but they all kind of hit on some of the key things that you need to do in order to be successful to throw the ball where it's supposed to go.
Right.
Command your pitches the way you need to, and so on and so forth. All that stuff is, you have the resources around you to perfect your craft or work on refining your craft when you're playing a sport. And there's a bit of there's very specific things you need to do, and it's pretty clear what those things are. And the more you work towards that, the better at it you get. When you get out of school, there's really not one. I mean, there are self-help, and you can learn from others' experiences and things like that, but there is no one way to run a sales call. There is no one way to, like a customer service interaction. Like there's no one way to handle it. Like everybody has their own unique style, and you might arrive at the same thing, but there's no guidebook that tells you exactly how to get there. Whereas in sports, there kind of is. And you've got plenty of people around you that are checking up to make sure that you're progressing the way that you need to, and you've got very finite measurements of whether or not you're achieving what you could possibly achieve. So I think that's a lot more open-ended when you get out of school. There's really nobody there to kind of design the plan for you, and as long as you follow it, you'll be successful.
Right.
So there's a lot more self-service type options out there where you have to just be okay with doing something the wrong way for a while until you figure out ways to fix it, or be okay with not knowing all the answers, or not knowing, how the thing that you're doing tomorrow is going to pan out. Or if you're even doing the right things to be prepared for it. So there's a lot after school that's a lot more nebulous, use that
Yeah.
word,
Yeah. Yeah.
than there is, when you're in school, where there's a very kind of defined path to being the best version of whatever sport it is that you're playing that you can be.
You know, I I think that's really profound because when you hear student athletes or whatever talk about support, they may not say that word, but I think the narrowing of uh, the paths to be successful when the staff, as they should, helps you say, okay, if you turn this way, if you throw this way, if you lift this way, if you whatever, you should be successful. There's a good chance that you're going to be successful. Um, I think when they talk about support and the lack of support, when they get to that reality of I've changed my identity, I don't have the support I had, it may really be what you said instead of just fans in the stands cheering, right? A lot of people you hear say that, and former athletes became professional. There's no one cheering, but my sense is that it's what you said is to be successful. This support group from nutrition to lifting, strength, sports med, all that kind of stuff, and individual practices with a coach to get you successful. I really think that may be the better definition of the lack of support than just somebody cheering for you when you walk out of the dugout or out of the tunnel or whatever it is. I'm not sure. I think that's a really big point that we maybe have not defined yet.
Yeah, and I would agree. I mean, there's a path, right? So, I use the weight loss analogy a lot of times. Like, for most people, if you exercise regularly and watch what you eat, you will incrementally lose weight and get into the type of shape that you want to be in and be able to hit those goals. And those goals can also be very specific. I want to lose 25 pounds in 6 months.
Right.
And you can check your progress towards those goals, at a fairly, normal increment, or every week or every month or every 3 months,
Right.
whatever. But it's just a lot more difficult because, your career is 40 years long,
Right.
or so, 45 years long. Like, it's very difficult to know when you're working on something, whether you're doing something that's truly going to benefit you in the future or
Right.
immediately. And
Right.
so, you can do things and see if it works out or see if it doesn't. There are things that you might do over and over and over again that don't seem like they're doing anything, but then 5 years later, all of a sudden that experience matters and it's helpful in that moment. So I think there's just a lot more unknown, and for an athlete, you're kind of used to the known. Like, yeah, as an athlete, you're not going to know like what your stats are going to be at the end of the year, how successful your team is going to be, how many wins that you're going to get, or anything like that. But generally speaking, if you work on certain things long enough, like as a pitcher, you could probably, if you had a goal to throw 80% of your pitches for strikes, there is a path to figure out how to do that.
Right.
But if your goal is to make $500,000 by the time you're 35 years old, there is no planned out path that you can follow, or, drills you can work on, or things like that, that will, I don't want to say guarantee, but will give you tons of confidence that you'll hit that goal as long as you stick to the plan.
Right.
So, as a former athlete, you have to understand that it's not gonna all come overnight, and you're not gonna have everything figured out. You got to be okay with it, because,
Right.
like I said, you don't have to have everything figured out in a sporting event or a sport, but you generally have enough people around you telling you you're on the right track,
Right.
and you lose that a little bit when you get out in the working world, because you're just doing what you think is right, but you may not know for years whether or not it's going to pay off
Right.
in the way that you
Yeah.
want it to.
So I think that gets back to the rhythm that you
Mhm.
talked about, that it's the support to focus on what you're doing is going to be successful. And it's the rhythm that next season, in the off season, next week, we'll work on this. Next, we'll rehab this. We'll, whatever the rotation for pitching, whatever. Um, I think this is really what I think we're putting words and relatability to what everyone is feeling. And I think once you can define it, everybody goes, oh yeah, like my identity changed. I am now a former student athlete instead of a student athlete, and my uniforms changed and all that sort of stuff, because that's when everyone ended up in my office. But I think that's really, really helpful, Jeremy. That is really helpful. I think that was really good. Okay. If you could do it all again, what would you do?
Based on what my handicap is right now, I'll probably play golf.
Yes.
No, no. Uh, I think I'd enjoy it a little bit more. Not to say that I didn't have a good time, but you're knowing what the outcome is, which is, when you're 22 years old, you're going to be, the game is going to tell you that it's time to move on.
Right.
I don't think I would have been caught up in wins, losses. I think I would have spent more time just kind of enjoying the process, and because I know now that it doesn't go on forever.
Right.
But I think also, I think I would have worked harder in the. This may not be exactly what you're talking about, but I would have worked harder in the weight room. Like
Yeah.
I it would have been interesting to have seen had I worked a little bit harder in that area if things would have been a little bit different. But at the same time, it is what it is, and but I think overall, I think just enjoying it more, because it's not the end all be all, and that's not the only thing you're ever going to do when you're living. That
Right.
It makes it seem a little bit less serious when you look back, going, man, that was fun. All
Yeah.
right, time to go do something else. So I think I would have just enjoyed it a little bit more and not sweated the small stuff over that period of time.
I think Mike McCree said in his interview, he said, there's so much chaos. You have class, and you have all kinds of meetings you have to attend, plus community service and studying, and then like life, and
Yeah.
sleeping and eating and that sort of thing. So I think
There actually is one thing I'll add to that, if it's all right.
Yeah.
I think I would have done more to prepare for the future too, because that time is, like when it's over, when your sports career is over, whenever that is, whether that's 20 years in the big leagues, or if that's
Right.
senior high school, there is something after that, and I think that's something that doesn't get driven home enough. I mean, obviously the NCAA has the 98% of they're major in something of whatever whatever that tagline is.
Yeah.
I think everybody hears that and kind of knows it, but at the same time, like, nobody really ever talks about it in a real world way. And they don't talk about it in a way that doesn't sound like the most depressing thing ever. Like, it's really hard to tell a sophomore, athlete, hey, one of these days this is not going to be your life anymore.
Right.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
Right.
It's not believable, and it's somewhat kind of depressing when you talk about it that way.
Yeah, and it shouldn't.
But I think talking about, hey, listen, you're in a great place where you are now. You're able to play a sport that you love, and that sport supporting you and helping you learn skills that are going to be impactful later on down the road. Wouldn't be bad for them to kind of lay out what some of those skills are that you are learning, so they can start to kind of think about and develop those. But then also, letting them understand, like, this is a part of your life it's great and you're going to enjoy it, but here are the reasons why it's important to start thinking about what's next, because one of these days this won't just be everything you do. You'll have other things that you'll want to do. Right. And the sooner you start preparing for that, the better. Right. So it'd be nice if there's a little bit more formal, I guess, acknowledgement and development that goes into what are you going to do after the fact. Right. Because, colleges, in my opinion, like, and this isn't necessarily a criticism, their job isn't to help you prepare for the future. Their job is to keep you eligible so you can continue to perform
Right.
on the sports team
Right.
for
I
the
know.
athletic department.
Yeah, I know.
And again, that's not necessarily a criticism. It's just, I think having other resources to help people understand that there is life after that sport and give them you talked about it earlier, the support that they need. Um, and maybe even opportunities to kind of think about what
Right.
interests you, what do you care about, what do you
Right.
like, what do you not like, just getting the wheels turning as far as what you might want to do, as opposed to some people who leave and you're like, all right, well, I got to figure it out now. Helping them kind of understand going into college after the sport's over, what's actually going to be the outcome after that.
Yes, and I think the other problem I had is the any kind of conversation about it is, well, you won't always get to do this. Okay, well, there's a lot of stuff in life you won't get to do again, but it's not a reason to project depression or it's all over or life is somehow 50% of what it was. Is that, hey, let's look at what you're doing here and how you can project that next, because you're going to enjoy this and you enjoy and you're good at what you're doing within your sport. How do we take this to next? And everyone's got next. I mean, everybody does. So, yeah.
I think we focus too much on like forcing the issue as opposed to selling the benefits.
Yes.
So like
Yeah.
I think about reading. Like when I was in school, I hated to read. Not because reading wasn't fun, but because reading was like a task that you were generally forced to do.
Right.
You grow up, you're in school and you're reading books that you have literally no interest in because they tell you you're supposed to.
Right.
And there almost becomes this like slight resentment towards these
Correct.
tasks that are, or this activity that is being told to you as opposed to you kind of volunteering to do for yourself.
Right.
And similarly, I think the message of, hey, this is going to come to an end one day. It's like, well, that's depressing. Instead of, hey, listen, this is something that one of these days you won't be doing, but here's all the opportunity that you'll have beyond that. And here's why it's really important for you to start thinking about those things. Like you have to kind of state what's going to happen, but at the same time, focus more on selling the benefit of what's next as opposed to just being the person who's telling a 17 or 18 or 19-year-old, student athlete, yeah, you won't have this skill forever. I mean, because nobody wants to hear that message. But if you sell the benefits on why it's cool to start doing the other things, then it might just help change the mindset a little bit.
Exactly, because there are so many things about being a student athlete that change you and experiences that are amazing, that help for your entire life. It just, I think the way, and I also think when they present it that way, they also present it as, when I've heard it, because I wasn't a student athlete, when I've heard it presented is, well, you won't get to do this all your life. It's almost like I feel like they're jealous that they aren't back in school, and I'm like, well, this isn't fitting. Why are you saying this? Or there's no steps to that. So that's kind of what we're going to do here. But I think this was really great. I appreciate it. And I know you're busy and making the world better and safer for a better tomorrow. So, but I appreciate it. And until next time, we're on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, team meeting. Until next time, let's have another team meeting. Thank you, Jeramy.
All right. Thanks for having me.